at what point does it become like, is it too much or not enough? And when is it a good time to push yourself? Because I mean, those experiences are obviously, I mean, it's kind of what makes life, right?
Yeah,
But we obviously can't do that um,
regularly. You can't do that.
all the
Yeah,
time.
you have to know when to go into that deep place.
Recently, one of my athletes, Jeff Baumgardener, and I had a chat about our recent training methodology based on recovery and training metrics. I wanted to share that with you in a podcast format. So here is our video podcast chat of our training metrics based around HRV, sleep scores, and how we implemented that into deciding what intensity and what workouts he should be doing on a specific day. I would like to mention that Jeff is an esteemed gastroenterologist in California, where he lives with his wife and two sons. His wife, of which is a well-known racer and a collaborator with the FemCycle Collab for indoor racing. Jeff is a competitive Zwift and Indivelo indoor cyclist athlete, but he also does get outside once in a while. He certainly knows how to smash it. One of the things I find most interesting about Jeff is his tenacious desire to continue training even when metrics are low, motivation is low, and his ability to recover day to day, which makes him, quite frankly, an astounding athlete, not only in the physical side, but the mental side. So I hope you enjoy this chat about our HRV recovery metric based training and how that may have hindered or enhanced his performance.
I mean,
So this kind of gets us into what we wanted to talk about. When do you know, how do you know when to push? How
yeah,
do you know when to go hard? How do you know when to go easy with HRV metrics training? I didn't
yeah.
actually plan that
No,
all
no, it was a
tying
good
in.
segue. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's a good segue because in general, again, for me, I'm always willing to train and go hard. And because I'm relatively time limited and I just genetically recover relatively well, I think, I can go hard a lot. And but that's not necessarily how you get stronger, because even though I know in theory that you get stronger by resting, not by going hard. It's by resting after you go
Mhm.
hard. It's important, and it's also just mentally. It's hard for me to rest because I just, when I'm not doing something, I feel like I'm failing. To be honest, like if being non-productive or not active, I feel like I'm missing out on something, and I have a lot of guilt about not doing it, or whatever that it may be. And so I think it's
Sure.
important to be able to know, and to, for someone with a scientific, a numbers and objective type of mind, I need to know this is a day you need to rest. And we've been working over
Mhm.
the past year of RP, listening to your body and recognizing signs of your body needing rest and respecting that.
Mhm.
But it is, I think, I think it was interesting in a good way of, when you brought up, let's look at HRV or some other kind of metric data as a way of dictating how hard one should go. Granted, I join race series and there are going to be days where maybe I go and maybe I should have rested, but those will be much fewer and far between. And if we use it as a training in a training plan, um, you had brought up the idea of using HRV because there is some data that you had brought up, that
Mhm.
doing hard days when your HRV data is good is more effective than just going hard on a set schedule by planning breaks and then just going hard when it's scheduled, but not necessarily when your body is ready for it. Was that correct in understanding of what you brought up?
Mhm. Yeah, and basically trying to maximize when your body is ready to be able to go hard. And I certainly understand it because some days you're like, oh, I feel like I should be riding today, but oh, I have a planned rest day, or I have or I'm just not feeling great, even though I have something planned. Like yesterday was a day for me. Like I had a free day. I was like, oh, I can go for a bike ride. I can go in like 3-4 hours and no one's gonna care. And I was like, I wasn't feeling it. I felt like crap. I was like unmotivated. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I just need, and it's kind of getting back to, I think I need like just take the day off, even if I have time, even if I have it. And then today, when I have a little bit more energy, I can go ride. And, and today I felt better. I felt more motivated to go ride and have some fun, chat with people, get excited about riding a bike again. Because at the end of the day, it's fun to talk about fitness and it's fun to talk about going hard and trying to hit new numbers, but it's all about, having fun and pushing yourself in the experience of cycling and endurance sports that we truly enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, neither of us is true professionals, so, we're not making money on our riding of our bike. So it should be fun as well.
No.
But so, I mean, what was the data that you had seen that HRV was a good way of using that kind of metric to dictate better gains?
Yeah, I was trying to pull up the previous article I saw, and I wasn't able to find it, but I found a different article. I found a different actually. But there was a review article on HRV based training for improving VO2 max in endurance athletes. It's a systematic review and meta analysis. This was by Granero Gallegos et al. I mean, there's a few more authors. And they kind of reviewed that overall, even with some of the risks of bias that there appears to be more of a trend with that with HRV-based training. So modulating it around your HRV or other metrics can enhance your performance. I think figure 3 they have here, there's two, maybe 3, a fourth actually I see now that have overlapping arrow bars with the 0, which kind of tells me that their standard deviation is not necessarily outside of the range of the mean for a difference between normal training and an HRV, which would tell me it's not, most likely is not significant or not having an effect, and it could just be due to bias. But then there's about like 10 other sources that have some sort of effect size, like way out closer to 0.5 or closer to halfway between.
And is this just
so I was
for
like, okay,
trained
maybe there's
people,
something,
or is this also for not? Is this mainly focused on people who already are well trained, or?
There was a variety of actually people. It looks like they did elite, amateur, and then they also split it into men and women as well to see if there's any sex differences. It appears to have a more beneficial. I believe they summarized that it would have a more beneficial effect in amateur athletes and in women specifically. To me, amateur athletes is probably because they don't have the ability to recover as much as opposed to elite athletes who can go hard every single day. And then women as well, largely due to just menstrual cycling. The HRV and those kind of trends will change throughout time. It'd be kind of interesting to see a postmenopausal woman if they could split that up and see if there's a different in HRV trend or if there's a different in the number of high intensity days one can handle pre versus postmenopausal. But that is the review article. I then pulled up one article to see how some of these HRV guided protocols actually differed from ours. And so I know with our protocol, I basically told you if your HRV was high, so I believe for us that was.
So I mean, my baseline. I recently got a Phoenix or the
Yes,
Epix.
Yeah. So how are we tracking this? Sorry, before I get into the details.
So this happened because I got a Epix Pro this winter, which now tracks HRV data overnight. And then we also started talking about other metrics. So it gives me a sleep score, which is 0 to 100, 90 and above is excellent sleep, 80 to 90 is good, and under 70 to 80 is fair. There are lower, but I actually have pretty decent sleep. And then also resting heart rate were the ones we were starting to look at. But HRV kind of looked over the night. And the baseline it looked like for me was roughly 39, 40 to 45, which was kind of my rough baseline. And before we ever did it, I definitely noticed that if I drank that night, my HRV would go down, or if I'm on, if I were on call and got called and so I got poor sleep, the HRV would go down as well. And the lowest I've ever seen is kind of like 35, maybe 34. But I've really never seen levels above 45, 46 on the high one. Since I've been tracking, and it roughly correlates pretty well to that. I'm usually in that kind of 40 to 45 zone. Although when I got sick, it was I had a hard time getting above 37, and that was disappointing for me. But it tracked very well with the illness, and so yes, with the tracking, what we said, if we're high, and I think we said above, I don't know, 42 or 43, but then that's when I would do either 5x8 high threshold, or the 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off of super, like above threshold, but as a threshold workout.
I call it the micro threshold.
The micro threshold. So it was kind of like 110-ish% FTP, roughly. I've only done it once. I've done it a couple times while running, but with cycling, it was when I ended up doing it. And it's weird because it's a lot of moving up and down, but I seemed to fit in with my threshold set around 355, 360. I was doing 400 to 410. That felt pretty not comfortable, but that felt very
about
good.
10
So
to
it's about 10
15%.
to 15% above threshold, or do kind of 3x15 high sweet spot or low threshold as that, and then throw in some lifting if I could. The middle zone, so if kind of just like low baseline, I've been kind of doing it when I'm in the kind of 39 to 41 ish, or if we've been checking in a little bit more in the last 2 weeks, and kind of like, well, how do you feel? Because we'll get into whether this metric works all that well for me. But that was more kind of endurance, longer endurance rides, or throwing in some LT1, so kind of tempo LT1 efforts. In your writing, you said kind of do 1 15-minute. I end up doing like multiple 15 to 20 minutes, or like a 30-minute LT1 type zone. For me, it's kind of like, again, with that FTP around 355, 360, that, I tend to do my endurance rides around 200 ish, 190 to 210 to keep it, but I probably should be a little lower, but that's where my legs kind of go. But with the LT1,
totally fine.
I tend to go to like 250 to 280 for 15 to 30 minute blocks.
Sure.
Which
and 30 minutes would be probably okay too. So
I feel good after those. I use those a little bit as, somewhat openers, or like if feel like I'm in an intermediate day, but I've done a lot of hard days, I'll do it. And then kind of low, or do kind of an endurance run in that moderate day. And then low HRV is do a very short, easy run, or a short endurance run, or kind of yoga, stretching, meditation, kind of really take it easy, or nothing. That was the protocol that we had developed.
And that was mainly based around HRV. So how did you feel HRV lined up, either with days that you felt good? We also looked at resting heart rate and sleep score. I know you mentioned that those seem to be maybe better predictors.
Yeah, so HRV. We finished off a pretty good threshold block right before I went on vacation, and then we were planning on doing this after I got back from vacation. And which seemed like a good idea, because then I would go into it rested, probably start with a higher HRV, and then we can see what would happen. Well, what happened was I got really terribly sick right at the end of my vacation. And actually, my vacation was not nearly as restful as I thought it was going to be, just because we went to Hawaii and we were super active. and I did a couple of the running threshold workouts. And I mean, frankly, I was running faster than I've really ever run before, and they felt great as workouts. But then at the end of the week, I got really sick for about 3 days, where I just was moping around the house and completely took off those 3 days. And I saw my HRV drop a lot. And so it took about a week or two after that to really get into it. And my HRV kind of slowly climbed up back to normal. But when we started trying to figure out on the metrics, or to follow along the plan of whether it was a high day, a medium day, or a low day, it does seem to me that resting heart rate and sleep score correlate better with how I feel going into and leaving a workout than the HRV. And that the HRV was very good at picking up me being ill, but I don't have wide swings, which made it for me a little bit difficult to say, is this truly I feel this is a day to push it, or is this a moderate day? Because mentally, or like there were times where like I felt ready to really rip it, but with my range of HRV being 40 to 45 or 39 to 44, I'd be 41, but I'd slept really well. My low resting heart rate was very low, and I was like, I'm ready. Let's do this. When by HRV, because there just wasn't all that much variation, it was a little bit harder to say whether this was a good day or a not good day. And so I think, when all things lined up, that's clear. But if sleep score and resting heart rate seem to correlate better, then and if those two were in like your good range compared to the HRV, I felt comfortable. And I think when we talked about it, we felt comfortable making that a hard day, even though the HRV might have been 39, kind of the low end of my baseline. And those workouts went very well, and the next day my HRV would be higher or about the same. It didn't show like HRV didn't necessarily correlate with recovery as well for me.
Sure.
So
cool. So I certainly am, based on some of this data, I am certainly more apt to either adjust or continue this, but adjust it in some kind of sense.
Yeah.
One of the articles that I was looking at, they did it differently, so that if your HRV was in the normal range, you would do a high intensity. And then if it was outside of that, you would either do a moderate intensity or low intensity day. And I was actually wondering if we should do a endurance when you're on the lower side of the range. And then if you're above your normal range, you would rest. If we wanted to try that for HRV, but I also do want to include that sleep score and resting heart rate, because I myself have also been tracking with my little ultra human ring, not sponsored, my HRV and my resting heart rate in my training is a little bit different, in the sense that I don't ride my bike like Monday through Friday at all, like commute or something, but that's like a 30-minute on my bike, zone 2, just kind of chilling with a backpack on. It's nothing. It's lots of stoplights. I would barely call it more than like walking for me. And so a lot of my hard days, a lot of my workouts are either probably like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I might ride on, and I might even ride on a Monday sometimes. But I have like several, like 2-3 days off. And some of the things that I've noticed is that my resting heart rate will come down on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I'll normally sit around about 42, and it'll come down to about 36 to 37. My HRV generally goes down as well. And then I believe my sleep score kind of just stays the same, unless I didn't get a good night's sleep or something because I was up studying.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting that when I started doing endurance workouts, they would bring my HRV up, and then when I would do high intensity workouts, it would bring my HRV even up a little bit more, which I thought was interesting. And my resting heart rate would go up if I had additional stress. So for you, I certainly noticed a little bit different trend with higher intensity or race-like workouts decreasing your HRV and increasing your heart rate. And that could just be due to you training more and having a higher training load. And so we need to kind of modulate the stress, where I have like a solid 3 days where I'm doing absolutely nothing. And so everything just plummets, and then I kind of build it back up from there, which I found was kind of interesting. In terms of your power output on like your races for about like 40 minutes and stuff,
Yeah.
I didn't see too much of a difference from before. Like the 2 weeks before you left for vacation, you were hitting about 365 normalized power for about 40 minutes. Just respectable, right? I can barely do that for 5. So
You're half my size.
it's still impressive. And about 380 for 20 minutes. So it's some good numbers. And then after that, you were able to essentially kind of do the same. I think I noticed a little bit of a dip this past week on one of your rides on Monday or Tuesday. You're riding with your son.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if there was any kind of thing there that would kind of drop any of the power or anything, or if it was just purely from kind of the stress of having a kid yell at you while you're riding.
Yeah, I mean, I was having to adjust his bike on the trainer and jump on and off to make sure that he was being taken care of. That Monday, I'm just looking back at my training peaks. That was just an endurance ride, but you were saying that my heart rate was higher.
Maybe it was the next day or something that it didn't look good. It was a sweet spot day.
The sweet spot day, yeah. So the sweet spot day was the day after, and it did feel more like, I'm looking at my notes from this, and it said felt more like threshold than sweet spot, but it went well. I also did the first, so, because I like to experiment on myself, but I've been doing a lot more riding without the fan, and I don't do well in the heat, mainly. So I've been trying to do more heat training.
That probably would increase it more. Yeah.
And so I did the first 2 of the 4 11-minute blocks of sweet spot without a fan. And you're right. The kid was riding with me for some of them, and just like, and so when I didn't turn on the and so it was interesting because I was doing sweet spot, but my heart rate was in the 160s, even though the week before I was doing threshold in my heart in the low 160s and high 150s for but for 40 extra watts, which I find interesting.
Yeah, it must have been. It's kind of a weird day.
Yeah.
Because you rode the past several days, and so I wouldn't expect you to be fresh. And looking at a lot of our metrics, your HRV was pretty consistent. Your resting, your pulse was going down.
Yeah.
Kind of where we're trending over the past few days as well. And sleep score looked fine.
But I found just personally that, and I did that as the week before I had done actually 4 threshold like workouts. I did 1 running, which was kind of low threshold, and that was kind of new. I did it on a trail run, but did kind of threshold type efforts. And then I did the 5x8 at high threshold, and that went very well. I did the micro threshold workout, and then I went back to doing the 5x8 the day after. So it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday of being a hard workout.
And Thursday was off.
One rest. So two hard days. I did a hard running workout, then the hard cycling rest day, then the micro thresholds, which was 110% FTP, 45 seconds off, 15 seconds for 15 minutes 3 times. And then I did again and matched the power of 5x8 the day afterwards, and then did an endurance day Sunday, endurance day Monday, and then did that that sweet spot that we were talking about, where the power seemed, the heart rate, the effort seemed higher than the power would suggest. But I did also wanted to do something, and because I find that sweet spot opens up my legs, because I was racing the next day, and I've now bumped up to the big boy category, and I did.
You had really good power the next day. It was actually closer to 370 for.
That's what that said. But when I did dual recording, and I do think that when I use virtual shifting, I get an extra 5 to 10 watts on my trainer compared to my pedals. But Zwift power ultimately for that race for 41 minutes, when it did all the calculations off the fit score, has me for 41 minutes with a normalized power of 390 for that race off my trainer.
Jesus Christ.
So
I
yeah.
mean, based on the results I have, so obviously,
No. So
power
looking,
efficiency,
and then when I looked at the duals, it looked like one pedal wasn't recording for like about 10 minutes, which is why it's 30. Yeah, it was weird. I just recharged them, so I think that it should be
so that might have been even reduced from what we normally would expect.
correct. So what you have in the Training Peaks data is my pedals, because I try to keep it consistent. But it does look like when I look at the tracing of the duals compared to the trainer, I do think the trainer overreads when I use virtual swifting in Zwift. This is a frustration of me and makes me feel bad.
I got it too. My my osteomas are. I had this recent power bump, and I bumped my power meter at the same time, and so they're reading high, but I'm also faster, and so I'm like, how am I doing How am I doing Jeff power at 60 kilograms? And I had to stop, recalibrate. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not that strong.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I haven't touched anything, but then doing it without the virtual shifting on Zwift the next day and doing Indy Velo today, the pedals are above the trainer. So I take it with a grain of salt. I don't think it was. I mean, Zwift has me at doing 390 for 40 minutes as normalized power. It was probably more like 380, but again, 40 minutes at 380. I'll take it. The day after I did.
I mean, you've peaked at that before.
Yeah,
definitely. So that's certainly not.
Oh, it's real. Like, I mean, is the 390 real? I don't know, but like, it's definitely between 380 and 390 for 40 minutes. So it was interesting that I went from a day of feeling like sweet spot was threshold based on RPE and heart rate to then being able to smash it 36 hours later after that workout.
And really, and looking at even the metrics, like your HRV was the same between the 2 days.
Yeah.
It looks like your resting heart rate went down.
Yeah.
It just went from like mid-range to lower range, right? And your sleep hours, at least in here, I don't know what your sleep score said, but sleep hours were a little bit higher.
Yeah. No,
which would almost be kind of indicative of like, are these metrics really? Are they really doing much?
Yeah.
One of the things I actually noticed and this is kind of a general oversee of the past 3 weeks versus the previous 3 to 4, probably month-ish, prior to your vacation, your HRV, resting heart rate, and all that stuff seems to be undulating more.
Yeah. It's going up and down more, but now that we're doing this based on it rather than before, because I was interested. So before we started trying this, it was flat.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was ridiculously flat, like flatter than like my butt. And we both know my butt is very flat. I'm a pole. But yeah, now it's undulating more, and I'm kind of curious, do we want, from a physiological perspective, do we want something where the training is we are undulating the system? And it's kind of similar to my form of training, because I'm off for 3 days. I have this very kind of like slower undulation rather than these kind of one-off days. It's more of like, I have this period during the week where it depresses and it goes up. Or do we want something that's more like flatlined? And it kind of gets into the theory of training, like rest and recovery, and training stress. Do we want to like thrash it for 5 days, kind of like a shock cycle, and then just completely recover? Or are we trying to do that during this kind of training where we are like doing it kind of within a few days at a time, and it's...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when we brought up the idea of HRV, I was interested because I'd also been reading about it and listening to podcasts where they bring that kind of data. But I was also, I thought that maybe it wasn't the right thing for me because it had been so flat since I started looking at it, knowing it from December and January, it was like 41 or 42, hands down, whatever, it didn't matter. Like there were days, obviously, I'd go out and drink too much and it would go down, but like it wasn't training related. It was definitely, it was always the same. And so I thought, like, are we really ever going to notice a difference? Like, how do I know when to go hard, or we just go hard all the time? Because it doesn't seem to make any difference to me. And so it's interesting that you're seeing that, and I too have been seeing it going up, and I was attributing it because I got sick but I got sick and now I'm going into training with it, and maybe there is something to it. But
Yeah,
I mean, do you
it's
see that
still
our
undulating even in the
my
past couple
training
of
load?
weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, well, yeah. So, what are you seeing in my training data? We're doing more based on TSS, or more intensity or less intensity in blocks because we're kind of going off of this, or because you were going to bring up what you see in the last couple of weeks. Do you see a
Yeah,
difference?
I was looking at that. It looks like we do kind of a similar amount of like days that are hard or easy, and that would kind of correlate well with you being able to put out similar power or even a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Um, you do about the same hours per week as well. I have noticed that your fitness level has gone down. I think you mentioned something
Yeah,
like that. You're
because it
like, oh,
annoys
God
me. I
damn
mean, it's a
it.
metric that I know doesn't mean anything, except it means something to someone who cares.
Your fatigue has also gone down. So your fitness was at 75, and it's now hovering about 68-ish, I
Yeah,
think. Your fatigue was at 85-ish. It's undulating more
yeah,
from like 78 to 100 or something, but ish 85. Fatigue is now about 10 lower, so about 75. I noticed your form is a little bit more similar, but it kind of was around -5-ish for those kind of few weeks.
yeah,
Granted, I didn't do an Excel sheet and average it.
yeah.
Um, and then the after, it seems a little bit closer to 0. So it seems like we're having similar levels of fitness,
But
or
with less
similar
fatigue.
levels of power output, but your fitness is actually your fitness score. So this would be attributed to your training and stress score,
Yeah,
and your fatigue has decreased, which would indicate to me we're doing less training. Um,
but more bang for
we're
your
doing
buck.
less and we're keeping the same.
Yeah.
We've effectively made you more efficient.
I mean,
training
that's a good
wise.
takeaway from this kind of thing, is that we're concentrating the efforts and getting the same out of it. Is that?
Hmm. I have noticed. I think from what I've seen, your HRV has dropped just a little bit, like a few points.
Yeah,
Not sure if it's significant. I don't know what is defined as significant in HRV.
yeah,
Generally, we would like to see like 5 or something. And your resting heart rate has gone up just a couple beats, which again is that really significant. Um, and granted, we've only been doing this for a month. It would be kind of interesting to see if we just do this for the next 2 years. I'm just kidding. You're with me forever.
I can never leave.
For like to see if some of these trends either hold or if they start to continue going up. Because if your resting heart rate continues going up, because we know that resting heart rate is correlated with longevity and things like that. So for this new training method, are we increasing resting heart rate? Granted, we're having less stress on the system, but the resting heart rate is going up. So is it actually, is it going to, you're not going to get as much of the benefits in terms of exercise,
Yeah,
especially since we're doing kind of a similar amount of volume per
yeah,
week, or what we kind of want. So those are kind of some of my thoughts.
yeah. I mean, with the
Um,
resting heart rate, just you know, it went from more like 46 to 47 to more like 48 to 50.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
pretty notable.
so is that significant? I mean, it's significant as in it is different, but is if that like is that significant in the scheme of like, and is there any damage to like raising your heart rate by doing this in this manner? And I doubt it, but yeah, it is interesting. It is true, and I noticed it too, that my resting heart rate would drop into the 45, 44 when I was truly rested. Now it's more like 46, 47, and on average it's closer to 50 rather than closer to 45,
Yeah.
before we started that.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that.
But still, on an absolute scale, if you're looking at population, someone with a resting heart rate of 50 is considered to be doing all right. So
You're doing pretty well.
yeah. So I like it's one thing if this is more efficient, but then my resting heart rate was now 65. That would be like, well, maybe that is interesting. Let's like take a look into this. If you're more efficient and it raises a little bit, but not in any way that is clinically significant, then it is something we should keep an eye on. And I agree, we can keep going with this.
Hmm. Yeah, so those were that was kind of all the things I noticed, or any kind of certain changes. Do you have any other comments?
I mean, I think everyone needs to, if you're thinking about doing this, I think you shouldn't just use HRV. If you can use resting heart rate or kind of sleep score, or kind of other, and your RPE of just how you feel. I do think that for me, resting heart rate and HRV, resting heart rate, and sleep score, because I sometimes have an excellent sleep score with less sleep. I generally get around 8 to 9 hours a night, but when I wake up sometimes at 5 in the morning to work out, I will sometimes have an excellent sleep score in the high 80s, low 90s, even with 7.5 hours of sleep, which is which is good. And obviously I feel tired because
Does that correlate with like how you feel as well?
When I wake up at 5 in the morning, of course I'm tired, right? But I still am able to do a workout or a race and feel good in it. It does take a little bit longer for your body to wake up, but the rest of the day does feel good, even though it was a slightly less time and waking up early. I do think it is, you would want to use more than just one data metric and find out which one works best for you. I do think that I am in you and I talking that week where I did four threshold workouts and no races. I didn't race that week. Somehow
you didn't. I was very proud of you.
I did it. But I was able to go hard on days where the resting heart rate and the sleep score were in the good range, but the HRV, if we had just gone on HRV, it would have said to kind of go moderate. And so I think if they are, they will all go in one way, trust that. But I think for me, resting heart rate probably has a little bit better predictor of whether it should be a hard day or not.
Yeah. So when I was in college back at Purdue, back in my day, my coach, Jack, he was a pretty big proponent of using motivation and resting heart rate to kind of determine when you should ride and when you should go hard and stuff. Yeah. Granted, I wasn't tracking any of that, so a lot of the times it would be like, how do I feel the night before? Like, if I can feel like my heart's just racing when I'm about to go to bed, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna have a great night's sleep. And then if I wake up in the morning, my heart's still like pumping out of my chest because I was insane back then. I would do 2.5 hours a sweet spot, and then I would finish off the ride with another hour and a half, and I'd throw in some sprints, and that would be my training ride. And then I'd do it two or three more times that week. I was overtraining, so don't get me wrong.
And college kids back in the day.
Yeah, and then we get hammered on Friday, and so there's no recovery whatsoever. And then we have to try and racing in the C category or something. I'm like, yeah. And then you get on the podium, you're like, this is the best day ever. For some of the things like that, I've definitely tried to listen to my body a lot more, and the resting heart rate is something I've really tried to look into a little bit more. I think one of the things, though, because with my resting heart rate, it kind of comes down after a few rest days. Generally, with a normal traditional training plan, we generally do so you have a day off. Let's say you have a day off Monday, and then the next 3 days you're going to ride. We generally would do an increasing intensity. So this would look like Tuesday, we would do like a light endurance day for like an hour. Then you would do some kind of like LT1, maybe a little bit of tempo, maybe some sweet spot for about like 20 to 40 minutes. And then that would be the Wednesday. And then Thursday you race. And you would just go as hard as you can for like 30 to 40 minutes. And you do your Thursday night crit. Granted, I see a lot of Tuesday night crits, so I don't know how many Thursday night crits there are. So you might have to move this back 2 days, but you do something along that, and then you would take a rest day, and then you would you'd finish off the weekend with 2 long endurance days and maybe a few efforts.
Yeah.
So that's what a traditional training plan looks like, and that has been kind of backed up from other coaches and their experiences. I think Dylan Johnson has started to backload some of his intensity.
Yeah.
There's another well-known coach. He's a conditioning coach that I kind of forget his name right now, but he prefers to backload a lot of intensity as well. He's he's like a big buff kind of meathead guy. I can look it up later. No, Joel Freeman. But I took one of his like webinars where he talked about uh, conditioning for athletes, and he was trying to teach coaches how do you
Yeah.
create an
Oh yeah.
effective training plan.
And do you think that increases durability, like being able to go hard? I mean, that was the Dylan Johnson's video recently, was where he was talking about backloading, is that he felt that helped kind of, not your FTP, but the durability metric of, can you go hard at the end of a race, or how much do you, by decreasing the amount.
So is he backloading within a microcycle or within a workout? And by microcycle, I mean within like a few day period, or within the workout. So let's say doing your intervals at the beginning of the ride versus the end of the ride.
So what he was doing on his most recent video that I watched, talking about durability, where it was, and he talked a little bit about backloading, it was both. It was both. So he would do some intervals at the beginning, and then he would do an interval at the end, and then doing intervals at the end of the ride as well. So you kind of preload, but he would make sure that he then rode a lot, so that then he would do hard, try to do the same kind of intervals at the end of the ride as well. And then
Sure.
also in his kind of periodization, it wasn't just going hard and then kind of it wasn't just ramping up, but he would do some hard at the beginning of a cycle and then also at the end of the cycle too, so that it was more about increasing the number of hard intervals when you're tired compared to when you're fresh.
Sure.
So it wasn't
I
just
will
the
say that
adaptation. It wasn't just the adaptations of when you're fresh. It was also, when your body's stressed, how do you increase that durability?
sure. I will say that even within like a microcycle, you are getting mini VO2 max gains. Like you'll get like a bump of like 2 or 3 like over the course of 2 days of doing VO2 max, and then it drops right down after you take you and you're fresh again, right? And so that's kind of the theory of backloading, is that you're generally improving what's known as the dominant limiter of your training. And so then you can push your legs later in the time. So you can really dig in with your legs and make them have those muscular adaptations, which is going to drive muscle growth, increase body mass, and having that increased body mass, or increased lean muscle mass, I should say,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of decreased fat mass. Of course, with exercise, granted, if you're training too much, you're going to increase your cortisol, increase your fat mass, and your hunger, blah, blah, blah. That is then going to increase cardiac output, because your heart size is going to match your body size. And so your cardiac output is going to match that. So if you can actually increase your body size, you can have a higher VO2 max, at least pure VO2 max. Whether or not you put on lean mass or fat mass is going to dictate whether that turns into a watt per kilogram difference or just a sheer power difference.
I think that'll be a good conversation, because I've gained weight over the past year and I'm stronger, so we can talk about that.
Yeah. The other thing is even later in a workout as well, and this tends to happen more with people who at least ride longer distances. From the research I've seen, is that if you want to improve sheer VO2 max, at most top efforts, doing your intervals at the beginning of your ride, I think has been shown to have a better benefit than doing them at the end of the ride. And it largely has to do probably with the stress response, because it's a lot more stressful for you to do a 6-minute interval at the end of the ride for the same power, I would say. It's like the end of a 4-hour ride than it is for the first hour of the ride. And so that really discordant stress versus added adaptive response is going to drive it more towards like surviving rather than adapting. But I will say, I can normally do my best 5-minute power, not in the first hour of the ride, not in the second hour, but generally after 3 hours. I can hit these like insane 5-minute powers, and then I'm done, because I don't have that much muscle glycogen or whatever. But you're so warmed up because your body's been just inundated with all these, with nitric oxide and sheer stress signals and all of the adrenaline that is causing the muscular vasculature to dilate, and your heart is being innervated with constant sympathetic tone, which is now going to make it contract harder, and so pushing out just a little bit more blood. And of course, you get some bronchodilation as well. That's allowing more ventilation to occur during exercise. And of course, you also start getting numb to the feeling of pain, which is
Well, it goes back to
just like nothing matters anymore. I'm just riding. So a lot of people, and this is kind of seeing that the intensity of your warm up doesn't necessarily matter as much as your time warming
Oh
up.
yeah,
I think there eventually it's kind of like our IQ thing. You have to hit a certain threshold of
yeah,
like the intensity. Generally, that's like bottom of zone two, I would say. And then after that, it's like whatever. You just need to hit that, and then whatever your warm up is going to be, your distance is the time is going to dictate how far you can go within the reasons of muscular
yeah,
endurance, obviously. Um, but yeah, I'm certainly not against backloading intervals because I actually, I mean, I really like being able to hit 350 and have it feel like threshold. And like, oh yeah, I'm just breathing just fine, but my legs are burning, right?
yeah,
They're just on fire. Um, but yeah, stuff like that. I certainly am not opposed to it, and
yeah,
there is a lot of cyclists who backload or put those intervals, a few at the beginning of the ride and then a few at the end of the ride. I think it was hypothesized, I think it was theorized. Some people were questioning it that Tadej Pogacar would do something similar. He would have like, oh, I want to work on 8-minute power today. So he would just do a bunch of 8-minute intervals. He would take whatever rest time he needed, whether that was like 3 minutes or 15 minutes. And there's kind of, I like the idea of getting like the full recovery, right? So that you're ready and able to fully commit to the next interval. I think there was one study that I saw in equine, so horse muscle, where they did a 2-minute wait period versus a 15-minute wait period. I think it was after like a 1 to 2 minute interval for the horse. And they found increased uh, stress muscle degradation markers from a 15-minute wait period before doing it again versus kind of more growth and muscle signaling versus doing it sooner. And it likely is due to just the time and the duration at which the horse is doing the work. So there's this kind of concept of doing a bunch of really, really hard shit in a very, very short period of time. The concept of like the double threshold days
yeah,
versus kind of like periodizing them out. But of course, your body, at least in a build phase, the theory with coaching is that you are getting your body able to adapt to the stress and being able to recover quicker and
yeah,
quicker and be able to kind of handle all that stress so that when you go to these double threshold days, your body just is like, oh yeah, I can
I can do
recover.
this. Yeah,
Easy peasy, no problem for me. And then you adapt like crazy because your recovery versus stimulus response, you have a crazy stimulus, but you have a really small stress response that you just adapt like crazy, and then you're like really really fit for a couple weeks until that stress response, and so you
yeah,
can't adapt anymore.
yeah.
And
You're
that's
at
the
you've hit the
theory of
ceiling.
peaking at
Yeah.
least.
Well, I mean, so I mean, we were talking about stress, and next week I'm going to do in Training Peaks stage race and doing 6 races in 7 days.
Yes.
I mean, just what do you? Let's hypothesize. What do you think is going to happen to my HRV and my resting heart rate? Do you think it'll kind of plateau? I mean, because if we look back in September, I didn't have to watch, so I don't know. We don't, but we can look at resting heart rate when I did something similar. I think, I mean, I wasn't really tracking it, but do we think
I
things are
was
going to
I
fall
was
apart,
looking at that.
or it's the end of September? Um, it was, I think it's like September 24th or so.
So January 1st ish,
Yeah.
end of December, we did a shock
We
cycle
did a
where I
shot. We
had you
did a really
do.
shock. Yeah, that was the last shock cycle we did.
So that was a 4x4 minute.
Yeah.
And looking at your HRV, because apparently it was tracked in your pulse, it looked like it just stayed the same
I
pretty
know.
much for your pulse, kind of over the few days, and then maybe started to go down a little bit. I know that you were feeling like really mentally fatigued. You're like, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. It looks like your HRV pretty much kind of stayed the same, maybe even increased towards the end, and then once you recovered, it just right because your parasympathetic system
Yeah.
probably ended up taking over and then just shunted your sympathetic, so you're not taking care of that. Um, I would imagine something similar. Granted, 16 minutes a day of high intensity versus like 40 minutes a day of like more threshold stuff. Is that going to be different? I would imagine if you are, I would imagine you would be relatively stable since you have a high capability to recover. and you eat relatively well and you have a consistent sleep schedule, if you started to overtrain, I would certainly imagine that heart rate to go up. I don't suspect that would occur. But if it were, it most likely would come. Oh, dude, you have a rest day on Thursday.
Yeah.
You're fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I was looking back at the end of September when I did the Indy Velo stage race last time, and the day at the end, that Monday, my resting heart rate was 48 still after 7 days of racing.
Yeah. So you stay pretty consistent.
It's very consistent.
Your motivation and your will to live, I feel, might be a little different. I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see how that'll go.
Yeah.
So next week we'll have that plan.
We'll have that.
Are you hoping to continue some kind of HRV based training? We can either or sleep. Maybe we can go more based on sleep score and resting, but then that kind of gets into you're resting, especially after these like racing every single day. It just stays the same.
Yeah.
So like, how good of that is a metric if I'm just having you race every day now? What am I actually doing as a coach then?
Fair. Well, yeah, I mean, I think you were bringing up earlier the idea of using, if I'm in the range, we go hard. If I'm on the lower, not high, medium, low, but if it's in range, we go hard, and if it's low, then we go easy. I don't know. So simplify it a little bit. But yeah, I think we should still. I mean, if what you're seeing, and I think this is cool, and I'm glad we talked this out. But if what you're seeing is I'm essentially more efficient, getting the right stimulus and still progressing and doing well, but the metrics of form and fatigue are lower, then sure, let's try it.
Yeah, there's one. I mean, that's one way to look at it, and we can certainly even see it like you're just as fit, but now your resting heart rate is higher, and so you would have like more capability to go down.
Yeah.
In that kind of sense. That was one way that because when I was getting really fit last year, my resting heart rate was about 50, but I was like hitting my best threshold numbers that I had done all year, even though my resting heart rate went up for whatever reason. I mean, and even the power to heart rate ratio can change over time and with training status, so it's certainly not out of the question.
Yeah.
One guy who I was doing lactate tests with.
Okay. Yeah.
His heart rate at threshold stayed the same, and his power at threshold stayed the same, but his heart rate and power at lactate threshold 1 went up, and I'm pretty sure his heart rate at lactate threshold 1 stayed the same, but his heart rate at the power went down. So his curve, instead of looking like this for like his power to heart rate, eventually started to look like that, and it was like the weirdest thing, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting that my heart rate for threshold and my heart rate for sweet spot are somewhat similar in this past week.
Yeah, especially for those days. And it could just be...
It could have been stressors of other sorts that may have impacted it. But
it could just be being fresh, too, if you have two...
Because I did have 2 endurance days before that. But it'll get an eye on. The other metric, actually, I did want to ask you, and I just thought about it, but... I have noticed that Garmin has estimated my VO2 max has gone down significantly over doing this.
That's right. So what does your Garmin say?
My Garmin says 59, but before we started doing this, it was 65.
Oh.
And I feel strong. We were just talking about it. I feel stronger. I smashed it on Wednesday. So that was weird.
Yeah, I know with Garmin, they can calculate it a few different ways. They might have changed their formula recently, but I know they can either calculate it based on, if you're not wearing like one of these, they'll just do it based on your power to heart rate and your estimated max heart rate. And so I have a little bit lower max heart rate than other people my age, so that's why it thinks mine is like 75, which is the weirdest thing. It's not even close when I get it tested. This thing I find is a little bit more accurate because it is measuring my HRV and resting heart rate. And so when the HRV goes up, that is an indication that my VO2 max is higher. And when my resting heart rate goes down, my VO2 max also goes up. So I find those kind of correlate.
Well, maybe
It
because the
also
resting
just
heart rate is going up a little bit. That's what brought it down. I don't know. Maybe that has something.
probably, or it's just switching into these using these metrics if they change the formula. But I would imagine it's probably because our HRV is going down just a little bit and the resting heart rate's going up just a little bit. A change of 5, I probably wouldn't expect, but
Yeah, I was
that
just
would be my guess.
yeah, I was 64,
However,
65 beforehand, and now it's 59.
yeah.
I mean, again, it's
However, we
like
also have to take into consideration cycling efficiency. And even if your VO2 max is lower, you still could be having a higher, more efficient power output. My boss here at the university, he's done cycling tests and he has like a high cycling efficiency, like it's up at like 28, 29, 30%. The average person is around like 20 to 22%, like as low as 18%, for like cycling efficiency. Like, so whatever power you're doing, like you multiply that by 5 times, and that's what you're actually generating for power, like heat and intensity. So
Yeah.
we were incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
When you're running, it's actually 50%,
Huh.
which is crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we did a good discussion of the HRV training, what we're interested in seeing, and we probably should revisit this in, I don't know, 2 to 3 months to see whether I see any more variation. Now that it's getting nicer, and I'll start mountain biking for an hour and a half, 2 hours a week with the boys.
Sure.
That just puts in low endurance volume. But I was looking at my total time on bike in the fall, and I was like, how was I doing 11 hours a week? And it was because I was riding for an hour and a half with the boys mountain biking. So, but
Sure.
there'll be some more volume, but I think if it's more efficient, and then I can also throw in some more volume, I'm really interested to see how what goes on.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to see. So with the current protocol,
Yeah.
we want to go based on sleep score, resting heart rate.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are better correlated. Sleep score, resting heart rate, plus minus motivation. But keep an eye on the the HRV to see whether it cycle. It does correlate a little bit more. But I think
Yeah, I'd be curious to try if the HRV is within range, if those correlate with like hard days,
Yeah.
versus if it's out of range, we should be putting in more like endurance days.
Okay.
I think next week we'll have a good opportunity with the racing,
Yeah.
to kind of see what happens when we just consistently hit it day after day after day. If it truly does stay, consistent. Obviously, we have the rest day in the middle, but
Well, do you want me to ride
cool.
on that day, just shits and giggles?
Yeah. Well, cool, Jeff. I appreciate you you chatting with me.
Enjoy your spring break, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I'm gonna go build a bike.
Have fun. But it's not here yet.
It's not here yet. I gotta take some of the other parts off the other bike, so I'm just gonna get that started.
All right. Cool, dude.
Yeah, keep me updated, man.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye.